Welcome to episode 63 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm interviewing Adam Green. Adam is a writer, director, and actor who works mostly in the horror genre. He recently completed a film called Digging Up the Marrow. In the interview, we talk extensively about how he got his start in the business and how he got his current film made. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread the word about the podcast, so they are greatly appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts and then just look for episode number 63. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Also, a quick plug for the new SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get high-quality professional script notes on your current screenplay. All the readers have experience reading for studios, production companies, or contests. The readers I've partnered with are the gatekeepers. They're exactly the same people who are going to be reading your scripts at the production companies and agencies that you submit to. The readers will evaluate your script on several key factors like concept and premise, structure, character, dialogue, and markability. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend. And I'm also offering a bonus. If you get a recommend from 2 readers, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast I use myself to promote my scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. Also, you can read a quick bio in each of the readers, and you can pick the one who you would like to read your script. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. A quick few words about what I'm working on. As I mentioned in the last episode, I'm writing a treatment for a comic book adaptation. I spent the weekend reading comics, so I'm going to start writing the actual treatment today. Hopefully I'll be done with the outline this week. Also, last week I did a blast using my own email and fax blast service. I reblasted my sci-fi noir script. I mentioned this script in December of 2013. I did a blast for it then as well. I ended up optioning it to a producer. In fact, the same producer who I'm writing this comic book treatment for is that producer. So that was actually the start of that relationship. I met him through that blast, and the script that I blasted was this sci-fi noir script. Anyway, he wasn't able to get the script produced, so the option eventually reverted back to me. So I went ahead and reblasted the script this past week. So we'll see how that turns out. I do find the number of responses does go down when blasting the same script again, but I did pick up quite a few new script requests, so it is worth doing. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm talking with writer, director, and actor Adam Green. If you haven't heard of Adam, I would highly advise that you have a quick look at his IMDb page before the interview just to get some context. We talk quite a bit about his early career and some of his early films. I'll of course link to his IMDb page in the show notes, but really all you need to do is just go to IMDb and type in Adam Green and he will come right up. Anyway, here is the interview. Welcome, Adam, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So to start out, I wonder if you can give us a quick overview of how you broke into the entertainment industry.
Well, I went to college and got a Bachelor of Science in TV and Film Production at Hofstra University in New York, which never, ever came up again at any point in my career. People always ask, should I go to film school? And if you have the means, yes, go. But if not, don't think that it has any bearing and that you still can't do this. So just to get that out of the way. But when I got out of college, my first job was back in my hometown of Boston doing really low budget local cable advertising. So like when you're watching a cable network like ESPN or MTV late at night and that local commercial comes on that's terrible and it's usually out of sync and it starts like 2 seconds into the commercial and it always ends with everybody waving in front of the store and all these graphics that you can't even read them all. That's what I was doing. And one of the incentives to taking that job was that I would have access to their equipment because I didn't have any money and I couldn't afford a camera. I mean, this was like 97, 98. So when I was working there, I met Will Barrett, who has since been my partner in Aeriescope for 17 years now and been the cinematographer on everything we've ever done. And that was the very first day shooting a car dealership. And I looked at him and I said, "You don't want to do this forever, do you?" And he said, I don't know why. And I said, because we could use this equipment at night when nobody knows and we could make our own stuff and we could get out of here. And it literally started on day one. And so we made a short film called Columbus Day Weekend, which was never meant for festivals or for anything other than to screen at a Halloween party. And it was just done for like $8 and it's really bad. But somehow that started getting passed around. And this was way before streaming video. So these were like VHS tapes that people were bootlegging and sending around. And I got an email from a guy at United Talent Agency, which is one of the biggest agencies out here, that a bunch of people at the agency were laughing at my short, and he recognized my name because he had gone to high school with me. So he was just pushing the mail cart at that point. But it was encouraging to know that it had made its way out here and people were acknowledging it. So after that, we decided to make a feature. And so we made a movie called Coffee and Donuts for $400, and we just used the assets that we had available to us, the Betacam from Time Warner and the 3 lights. And I wrote a script that was just based on my life and trying to get over my first girlfriend and trying to make it in the business. And we cast friends to play the parts. There were no professional actors, and the crew was different every night. It would just be friends that we could wrangle, and then we would teach them how to set up the lights and how to do things. And right when Coffee and Donuts was finished was when Clerks premiered. And that really kind of gave us hope because somebody else was doing what we were doing. And Coffee and Donuts won Best Picture at a film festival, and then lo and behold, I got signed by UTA. And I came out to LA and thinking like, oh, all this great stuff's going to happen. I'm doing what's now known in the industry as the water bottle tour, where you go meet at every studio and every producer and they love your stuff and they have all these projects for you. And I basically just starved for 3 years and nothing panned out. Anything that I was promised by anybody wasn't real. All this money to make things or scripts I'd written that were going to get made, nothing was happening. And I had a job as the DJ at the Rainbow Bar and Grill, which is like the heavy metal club on the Sunset Strip. And that job was great because I could literally eat the leftover food off of people's plates at the end of the night, and that's how I survived. And while I was in that DJ booth, I wrote Hatchet, which was something I had come up with at summer camp when I was 8 years old. And just as a horror fan, I was really disenchanted with the genre around the mid-2000s because it just felt so mean-spirited, and it had become all about torture porn, or it was remakes, and I didn't fall in love with horror to watch a woman get raped or to watch somebody just get strapped to a chair and tortured for 90 minutes. Like, that's not fun for me. So I wrote a movie that was an old school 80s slasher movie with over-the-top death scenes and, comedians in it. And I showed it to my agents, and they said, they'd send it out and see what would happen. And nobody wanted to make it. And the most famous rejection letter was the one that said, the writing is great, but this movie will never get made in this climate because it's not a remake, it's not a sequel, and it's not based on a Japanese one. That was the actual phrase, which became the tagline on the poster. And so we made Hatchet with $1.5 million that we raised in private equity. And the way we did that was by making a mock trailer for it for $12 was what we spent on that, I think. And it was very simple. It was just a camera moving through a swamp. We went on a swamp tour and hung the camera off the side of the boat, and then we had a little girl read the mythology of Victor Crowley, the monster, and we added some echo to her voice, and it sounded really creepy, and we put it online, and then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to see Hatchet. And nowadays, I don't know if that would still work. I don't necessarily think we were the first to make a fake trailer for a movie that didn't exist yet, but it hit, and it hit really big because a lot of other horror fans around the world felt the same way we did, and they wanted to see something like that again. So that's how we were able to start approaching financiers and hooking up with producers who had ins to people with money. And so we put together the 1.5, we made Hatchet, I showed it to my agents. They passed on representing it because they said, we don't represent, Sci-Fi Channel movies. We represent, film festival movies. And so 3 weeks later, we get into the Tribeca Film Festival. And all the buzz between the New York Times, the LA Times, was that Hatchet was going to be the big movie that year, and it was going to sell right out of the festival. So then my agents are like, we might have a franchise here, and we got to get in on this. So I fired them and went to a different agency. But now here we are 10 years later from when we filmed Hatchet, and it's a franchise with 2 sequels so far. And it's crazy how it happened. But I think the moral in all of it is just that where there's a will, there's a way. And I know that's so hard to hear because everything is against you in this business. Like when execs say they're always looking for a fresh voice and they're looking for something original, it's an outright lie. That is the last thing they want. They want an established property where they can plug in the numbers and the math. They want recognizable faces so that audiences will maybe go see the movie. They want somebody who's already done something that's made X amount of dollars at the box office. So for anybody who's still struggling and beating their head against the wall, I'm with you. And the saddest part is that it doesn't get easier. I mean, I've made Dig Up the Marrow is my 9th movie. My company, Ariscope, has existed for 17 years now. We've had 2 seasons of a sitcom. I mean, and it's still, every project, it's right back to square one again. And that was really how Dig Up the Marrow happened. We made a movie called Frozen that was like the hit of the Sundance Film Festival in 2010. But due to circumstances, the deal that the producers of that film had with this company called Overture, they had first right of refusal for that film. And Overture happened to be going out of business the very month that Frozen was finished and premiered at Sundance. So rather than let it go, they kicked it down to their sister company, Anchor Bay, who Anchor Bay put out Hatchet, Spiral, Grace, and Frozen, my first 4 films. And I wouldn't have a career without them, so I never want to sound ungrateful. But Spiral was an art house movie. Grace was very disturbing and weird. But Frozen was the one that we really felt was going to be our mainstream hit, and that was going to be the first movie that had, all our movies have had theatrical releases, but that was going to be on like 1,500 or 2,000 screens and have the $20 million in marketing so people would know about it. And that didn't happen. So we were really just depressed, and we're reading these reviews.
Let me stop you right there. We're going to get into Digging Up the Marrow. That's a lot of great information, and I just want to go back on a couple of things that you said and just dig in a little bit more deeply. You mentioned your short. What was your short called again?
The first short was called Columbus Day Weekend.
Okay, Columbus Day Weekend. And I was in Hollywood in those 90s, and I remember when South Park came out, and as you said, it was people bootlegging the VHS tapes and passing them around. So it's amazing once something got some sort of critical mass like that. But did that actually get you anything? It sounded like you said you had a friend, working in the mailroom at an agency. But did the fact that got passed around, did that give you even an inkling into anything? It didn't sound like it really ultimately led to much.
All it really did was boost our confidence that we had the ability to make something with nothing that was going to get attention. It's the equivalent now of making something and putting it on YouTube and it going viral. I mean, to know that the tape had made it out this far was really exciting. And what's funny is when I did finally save up enough money to fly to LA and try to meet with those agents, it had already been 3 months, so they didn't care anymore. Like, it's really true that when you're hot, it's for like a matter of hours. And if you don't make something happen right then, it's not happening. And
Yeah.
when I came out here, they were already on to this new short that everyone was talking about with cardboard cutouts that swear. And they were going to make it into a TV show. And I was like, that'll never work. And then South Park. So, but that was what cock-blocked me out of meeting with agents, because they were way more excited about Trey and Matt, which they should have been. And
now let's talk about. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. I mean, those guys are geniuses, and it's just been amazing what they've been able to do. It's astounding.
So let's talk about Coffee and Donuts for a second. So you're working a production job, which I'm sure, as most production jobs, have very long hours. Were you then literally shooting on the weekends, at nights? Were you taking like extended blocks, like you took 2 weeks off of your main job to shoot this thing? Just give us some of the logistics of how you actually got Coffee and Donuts done.
Well, we worked every day from 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, depending on the day, and then we would wait around and look busy until the boss had left the building, and then we would take the equipment and we would shoot all night, and then at 5 a.m. we would return all the equipment back where it's supposed to go, and the boss would come in around 6:30 or 7 and didn't know the difference. Now, we did get caught halfway through. I came back at 5 in the morning to return it, and he was waiting for me. And he said, if you touch this stuff again, I'm not just going to fire you, I'm going to prosecute you. And I kept stealing the equipment, and I finished my movie. So I'm not advising people do that, and especially now, you can get access to a camera now very cheaply. Back then, not so much. So, but that's how we did it, and we shot every night, every weekend, over a period of almost 6 months, because we could get very little done each night without having a real crew. So it was very hard, but that really set my work ethic that I still abide by. You know, I'm in the office by 2 a.m. every day writing, because I can get more done between 2 and 8 a.m. before the phone starts ringing and things start happening. But I'll work 18, 20 hours a day. And if you think you can do this and not do that, unless you're super rich where you can be like, I'm going to take this year to go write my next masterpiece, you know, good for you. That's awesome. That's not me. So I got to work all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, true. And I think a lot of people listening to this podcast would look at your career and say, wow, what a great career. And they don't necessarily appreciate those, 18-hour days that you're logging even after this many years. So that's an excellent point. So walk us through just a little bit of what you did. So you finished Coffee and Donuts. Did you submit it to all the typical film festivals? Did you get accepted to some? Did you get turned down by some? I just want to lead up to that point where you actually get signed. But what was sort of the steps with Coffee and Donuts?
We didn't know what we were doing, and we should have submitted, not that we would have gotten in necessarily, but, you never know. It's a crapshoot with film festivals. You never know what they're going to pick. But we should have submitted to Sundance and Toronto and places like that. But we didn't know anything. And so we happened to see something, I don't know if it was like a trade magazine in the office it's not even around anymore. It was called like the Smoky Mountain Film Festival, or the Nantahala Smoky Mountain Film Festival. And I was like, all right, and sent off a tape. And the next thing we knew, we were accepted. And then they contacted us and said, can you please send us the print? And I didn't know what a print was. So I literally had to write back, what is a print? And he said, the movie. And the thing with Coffee and Donuts is that it was shot on Beta SP. It was edited tape to tape, the old school way. So once you made a decision, you couldn't change it. It was as old school as it gets. And Will, my genius of a partner, figured out that if he jammed a Phillips head screwdriver in the time-based generator of the deck and twisted it, it would make the image stutter. And then by doing a half-mix dissolve over itself, it gave the illusion of 24 frames per second. And because people were looking at things on VHS back there, they thought it was film. They didn't know. And that's
wow.
He's amazing, and he can do anything. He's shot every single thing we've done, whether it's a sitcom, a black and white 1940s German movie, Frozen, everything looks different. And that's him. And I'm just lucky that he's in my life. But so they wanted a print, and we didn't have one, so they screened the movie on VHS, and we won Best Picture. And we thought our lives were going to change. We're like, we just won Best Picture. We're going to be, but where we had made a mistake was now we couldn't submit for any other festivals because festivals want premieres. Like Sundance isn't going to take a movie that already screened at some bullshit festival in the Smoky Mountains. I don't even know where the Smoky Mountains are. We didn't go to the festival because we couldn't afford to. And then when we won, we thought we were going to get money, or because they said we're going to send you your prize, and we were waiting and for this prize to arrive. And the prize was a tiny little Pelican case that you can fit like maybe one lens in for a camera. And to this day, that's still our pride and joy, and we share it. Sometimes Will takes it when he's on a shoot. Sometimes I take it. That's our Best Picture prize. But again, that did help because then when approaching agencies again, it was, hey, remember me? I made that short that you liked. They probably didn't remember at that point because it had already been a year. And then I made this movie. I made it with nothing, and we just won this film festival, and, here's my script. And I also had other scripts written. And that's the other thing, too. It's like if you're going to come out here, and you have to come out here, people will keep saying, you don't have to live in L.A. That's bullshit. You do. And if you're not willing to do that, then just stop now because it's not going to happen. And if you're not at least willing to relocate and do all those meetings and get in front of the right people and make those connections, then write a novel then. Don't stop writing or keep writing scripts. But at some point, you're going to have to come out here. And I never wanted to live here. I still don't want to live here. I've been here 15 years as of Friday. I would give anything to go home to Holliston, Massachusetts and not live in L.A. I really would. But you do need to come here. And, there's always the exception story. But normally it's somebody who became established and now they can live wherever they want. And they can do interviews on Skype and meetings that way. And so they don't have to be there. But when you're just starting out, you need to be here. But I had other scripts written. And that definitely helped because they'll always say, oh, this was really good. What else? You have to have
how many scripts at this point when you're so you're showing Coffee and Donuts around, how many scripts would you say you had to show to the agents?
I had two other ones that were both comedies. One was called God Only Knows, which has almost been made many times over the past 17 years. And another one was terrible, which was called The Intern. And thankfully, they were so impressed with God Only Knows, they never asked to read that one because that could have killed it for me. It was not good. I didn't know structure yet. I didn't know, there were so many amateur mistakes that I was still making at that point. But, and then Hatchet was the next feature screenplay that I wrote after that.
Walk us through this process with Coffees and Donuts, just so we have a sort of a specific template. Maybe people could even follow it. You've got one award from the Smoky Mountain Film Festival. You've got a physical VHS film to show. You've got a script to send in. What exactly did you do? Did you cold call the agents? Did you send them letters? And if you sent them letters, what was in those letters?
The letters were usually a copy of the movie and a letter just explaining, introducing ourselves and what we had accomplished. And, it helped to have an award attached to the movie. And also we included a trailer for the movie. And I think that's very important to do because the average exec or agent, they're not going to watch a 90-minute movie. They don't have the time for that. They don't have the patience for it. I mean, it's like trying to get them to come to a screening. Nobody will actually come to a screening. And that's the most disenchanting thing about Hollywood. Most of the people making the decisions don't even like movies. They went to law school or business school, or they just, occasionally you'll meet one, but a lot of them don't, and they don't have time for that. And you got to remember, too, they're being sent hundreds of things every week. It's physically impossible. So the trailer was really cute, and we had an award, and we had a movie, but really I think I had the good luck of the fact that first short film wound up in the hands of somebody who had gone to my high school who wanted to be an agent someday. So that really helped. I never would have known that there were agents at UTA laughing at something I had made. I never would have known. But when he told me that really helped. So that's why there is no right or wrong way. Everybody makes their own path. And now I would have given anything to have had streaming video and things like YouTube back then. I mean, we were doing streaming video in 98 on our website. We make short films for Halloween every year. We've done 17 years of them so far. And we just do those for the fans. We just put them on, they're free, and people can watch them. But this was like a good 5 or 6 years before YouTube and other people were doing that. But it's hard to stand out when there's, like 2 million things uploaded a day. It's hard. But one piece of advice I would give people is that a lot of the studio execs and agents, they are taking people off of YouTube now. People are getting 3-picture deals who have absolutely no talent. They just play video games and talk about it. But because they have a following, because that's the content and a brand and followers is everything to them now. So if you have 8 million followers on YouTube, they'll give you the time of day and they'll maybe talk to you. But how one thing stands out from another, I wish I could tell you. But we've made shorts that were so good and only gotten 20,000 views. And then we've made other ones that were so dumb. Like we did this one called Jack Chop. It was millions of views overnight, and I don't know why. I still don't understand why anybody else thinks it's funny besides me. It's just this 2-minute thing of a guy trying to sell a pumpkin carving kit with a Boston accent, and he keeps naming himself. And overnight, it became huge. Then it got pulled down because the fake phone number we used turned out to be a real phone number, and so the FCC made us take it down. We had to start over again. And then there's this other shady thing with YouTube where somebody can flag your content and say it offended them, and now your shit's blocked. So unless somebody's logged in and have proven that they're 18, they won't see your thing. And that happened with our 2 biggest viral hits, Jack Chop and Saber. Saber was a Star Wars fan film that won 2 awards from Lucasfilm. I mean, George Lucas sent us a card and stuff. It was insane. But again, just something we did for fun with no money. And those 2 were huge, but somebody would flag them and then they would grab it off of our page and repost it on theirs so that they could get the hits. And I had advertising to it. With Jack Chop, the worst thing was that there were a couple people that even took our credits off and added their own so that they could take credit for it. And I wrote to them personally saying, why would you do this? You just took credit for my thing. And they literally wrote back, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, it's a couple of Russians.
That's the world we live in. But you can't get disenchanted by it because it's a very small minority. Most people, even in LA, everyone talks about how phony it is, how fake it is. There's some wonderful people out here. And the fact that you get to meet so many other creative people and make these alliances and these friendships. And my company now, 17 years, and we've mainly worked with the same crew on everything. No matter how big we've gotten, we've remained loyal to the original core team. So whenever we can, those people have first right at those jobs. But we never could have done it any other way. But I also am working in a genre that has a fan base that's like no other. You don't see romantic comedy conventions or even action movie conventions. But with horror, these fans are like nothing you've ever seen. And if you do right by them and they know that you care and you're good to them, they will follow you to the grave and they will support you. They won't pirate your movie or torrent it. They will drive 5 hours to the closest theater that's playing it to support it in the theater. They'll buy the T-shirt. They'll tattoo Victor Crowley or the Aeroscope logo on their arm. It's crazy. But that's another thing that I think people need to factor in. If you're listening to this and you're somebody who's trying to write romantic comedies, a lot of what I do might not necessarily apply to you because I had the luck of working in a genre that I loved that had all of that. I could go to conventions and do a panel on my movie and show clips from it and talk about it, and that really made a difference.
Yeah. Let's get into digging up the marrow. Maybe you can start out by just giving us a quick log line or pitch about the movie in case people haven't seen it or haven't seen the trailer. You can just kind of quickly tell us what it's about.
Well, Digging Up the Marrow is a kind of new blend of documentary and fictional narrative where I play myself, and a lot of the movie is actually real. And the story is that a kind of crazy guy named William Decker, who claims that monsters are real and he can prove it, contacts me through my fan mail. And because I've always hoped monsters were real and because I think it could be a funny little short film if nothing else, I take him up on it. and I began interviewing him and having him take me out to the spot where he's going to show me those monsters. And then it kind of goes from there. So what's cool about the movie is that everybody in it is playing themselves, and it is a scripted narrative movie just like anything else, but it's presented in such a way that it almost feels like it's improv and like it is real. But the one thing that we did was that we cast Ray Wise as the crazy guy, because we didn't want anybody to think we were hoaxing them. We didn't want anybody to think that it is real, because then when the first monster shows up, which, spoiler, there's monsters, when the monster shows up, then you would go, wait a minute, this isn't real, and it would become all about being hoaxed. And so we're not trying to hoax anybody. It's a scripted narrative movie. It's just being presented in a way that you don't usually see. But it's not a found footage movie. It's not a mockumentary. So I don't know what you call it. And it's been interesting doing these press days, because that's what everyone keeps bringing up. They're like, what do you call this? And I'm like, I don't know. So, but it all came back to Coffee and Donuts. It was, how do we make something where we use our assets that only we have, and we just didn't want to answer to a bunch of financiers or an upfront deal with a distributor or producers outside of our own group. We just wanted to make something that was, to us, was an art project.
Mm-hmm. And maybe we could touch on that a little bit. How scripted was this? Was every line of dialogue scripted, or was there some, just ad-libbing and coming up with stuff as you're shooting?
It was completely scripted. At the very front of the movie, there's some interviews with celebrities talking about why they like monsters, and there's a little piece that's like maybe 30, 40 seconds long where we show the fans of Ariscope, of my company, showing their tattoos and talking about why they love our movies. But everything else is scripted. Now, there was a lot of improv that happened on set, and it was fantastic, but it didn't make it into the movie, because I'm a big component of short movies. I don't think anybody ever goes to see a movie and says, man, that was too short. That doesn't really happen. And especially just this past year with award season, since I'm in the academies and the unions, I get the screeners. I don't think I've watched a single movie that was under 2.5 hours. And they all could have been an hour shorter, most of them. And so with this, we really wanted to keep it to 80 minutes, 84 minutes. And so all that improv ended up as extended or deleted scenes on the DVD. And I think fans love that. If they like the movie, if they get to watch an extra 30 minutes of stuff that wasn't in the movie, now there's a reason to buy the DVD and the Blu-ray as well, because a lot of people just stream stuff or wait for Netflix now. So that is something people should think about. Like, don't be too precious with your material. Be ruthless and get it as tight as possible. But everything you see in the movie is scripted.
So maybe you can talk a little bit sort of about the logistics. You just said that you didn't have a distributor when you started to make it. So I'm assuming basically you funded this movie with your production company, so you didn't take funding from an outside source like a distributor. How does something like that work? So then you get the film done, you go about getting a distributor. And one of the things that I always, as an independent filmmaker myself, people are always, trying to get the distributors on early so that they know they've got that locked in. And I'm just curious kind of what your approach was and how this all logistically worked.
Well, typically the movies we make, we do have distribution beforehand, or we have something in writing that we can show a financier that says, upon delivery, we will pay at least this much for this title. And then you have a foreign sales company that says, these are our projections that we can get for this movie with this cast. And that's how you put the budget together. The days of just getting somebody to hand you $3 million are over. That's very hard to come by, unless you have something really exceptional on your hands, like an actor attached to they know is going to get them their money back. But with this one, we couldn't afford to make this movie entirely with our own money, because it as much as it is meant to look like it was just me and Will on a camera, there was a lot of expensive stuff in this film, mainly the monsters. So what we did do, though, was we've had great relationships with some private equity people, like, for instance, some of the people who financed the first Hatchet. I mean, we really did well by them with that movie becoming a franchise. So when we needed money, we would go to them and say, look, you can trust us, and we just need this much, but that's what we need. And so we did take outside money, but it was an amount where they didn't now own the movie or control it or have any say in it. They were just kind of gap financing it almost. And that way, once we sold it, and they were confident that for the dollar amount we were making this for, and given our track record, that we would be able to at least recoup our budget, which we did in spades between all the territories that have acquired the film now. But we didn't do the traditional thing of doing 1 million festivals with this one, which was a very bold choice. We decided we would do one festival, and it was going to be Fright Fest in London. It's the best horror festival on the planet. The fans there are the most hardcore out of anybody in the world. They sleep outside for 1 or 2 days just to get their tickets. And when they're there, you have usually the same seat for 5 days. And they, from like 9 a.m. until 1 in the morning, they sit there and watch every film. And they come from all over the world. So that's where I wanted this to premiere. And we didn't have a trailer. We didn't have stills. It was just that it was my next movie. And thankfully, the fans sold out that screen instantly. And when the movie started, I said to them, you're here tonight and you have no idea what you're about to see. And that means you're here because at this point you trust me, and thank you for that. And don't think I don't notice it. And I will never abuse that trust. And I think you're really going to dig this. And that was the best way to see the movie. But they also honored, even the critics who were there, my request to not spoil the movie and not say what it was. They just said how they felt about it, which thankfully across the board was all positive, but they didn't say what it was. And then we started showing distributors. And so very quickly we ended up with Image, who we've had this amazing relationship with, between Holliston and Chillerama, and Mark Ward, who is their acquisitions person. He was the acquisitions person at Anchor Bay, who bought Hatchet and Spiral and Frozen and Grace. So we really wanted to be with them. But we only wanted them for VOD and DVD and Blu-ray, because unfortunately the industry still is not in a place where, as an independent production company, you can go make a deal with Netflix or Hulu or video on demand that's remotely going to be fair. So you have to still go through a established distributor. But we held the theatrical rights, because that's always where we felt that we've been kind of ripped off, for lack of a better term. But all of our movies have been put in theaters, and like Hatchet was on 80 screens. There was no marketing behind that film. There were no commercials. There were no billboards. Nobody knew it was there unless you had been to a horror convention and met me. That was it. And yet, when they kind of turned around the end of the day, it was like well over $1 million that they claimed they spent on that release. And I'm not saying they're lying necessarily, but it didn't make a difference. So with this, we wanted to do the theatrical release, and we were going to do it very frugally. And now that we have this following, we're touring the film. And so, especially because the film is based on an art exhibit that inspired it. So we're going to go to each city with not just the movie and with myself and Alex Pardee, the artist, but also the art exhibit. And it's still the same price as any other movie, $15. And the only way that you're going to know about it is through following us on Twitter or looking at the website or Facebook. And, you know, the horror sites are talking about it. And that's enough, because we're going strategically from like San Francisco to New York to Boston to New York to Austin. And then the movie will open in LA on the 20th when Image puts it on VOD. And so that's really just the promotion for it. And then 2 weeks later, it'll expand to 10 other theaters. But we're controlling all of that. So it just makes it easier. And again, I don't want to come off like I'm saying all these distributors ripped us off. I'm sure they did spend that money, but it's not well spent, and it was overspent. So now with this one, they can't say, oh, well, first we still need to recoup the $3 million that we spent on this theatrical. We did that.
Mm-hmm. I guess the risk is, if the movie, I mean, this movie turned out pretty well. You got a good reception at the film festival. So then obviously distributors are happy to jump on board. I guess the risk is, if the movie doesn't turn out that well, or you don't get that initial excitement, then distributors are going to back away, as opposed to getting the distribution money up front. Then they're kind of stuck with it, even if the movie doesn't turn out that well.
Yeah, that's always the risk, but with this, we were very confident in the idea. We all deferred getting paid anything on it, which was how we were able to just put all the money on the screen. And that's a big gamble to take. It really is. But we made this over the course of 4 years. So while we made this movie, we also made Chillerama, Hatchet 2, Hatchet 3, and 2 seasons of Holliston. So we were all employed and working during that time. And just like Coffee and Donuts, this was the passion project. Not that they aren't all passion projects, but this really was a passion project that was being made around all of that. So if it hadn't turned out well, especially with how weird this idea is, it could have not worked. And there were several times in the making of it where I was doubting that it was going to work. I didn't know. And the first time we ever showed it to real people and not friends was at Butnumathon in Austin. It's a 24-hour film festival that Harry Knowles does for his birthday every year. And the cool thing about Butnumathon is only he knows what movies are going to play. So the audience sits there for 24 hours, and they have no idea. And sometimes he'll show classics, and then all of a sudden it'll be a world premiere of something that's not even finished yet. The year that Up the Marrow played there, we played after The Wolf of Wall Street and The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, and Popeye. So and no one had ever seen any of those movies, and so it was exciting. And then we showed a rough version of Marrow because it hadn't been picture locked yet, and there weren't the visual effects and score and color. But we just wanted to see what we had. And we thought that would be a great litmus test. Thankfully, Harry Knowles loved it and wanted to play it, which was huge. But we wanted to show it to an audience that wasn't necessarily our fans, that wasn't necessarily a horror audience, and see what the real reaction was. And thankfully, even though it played at 6 a.m. after all those other huge movies, we were one of the biggest standouts of that Butnumathon. So that really gave us the confidence to move forward with locking picture and spending the money that needed to be spent on color and visual effects and score and sound design and mixing. And then we premiered at Fright Fest a few months later.
Perfect. I'm curious if just this template for doing it yourself, getting the private equity funding and not getting the distribution up front, is it something you would try again? That's kind of, I guess, the ultimate question. If you felt like this was a success enough to go and do it again.
I definitely would. It's not something that you can just necessarily keep doing like year after year because, like I said, this was a long process because. Without any of us getting paid up front, that's really gambling. Like I can tell you with Spiral, which I didn't write, I directed, I did that deferred. I never got paid, and I never will, because the movie wasn't a commercial hit. Artistically, it's one of our greatest achievements, and critically, it was this darling, but even though it had Amber Tamlin and Zach Levi and Joel David Moore, it just didn't. Unfortunately, it came out 4 months after Hatchet, and it was just buried in Victor Crowley's shadow. So now people are starting to see it, but that one didn't pay off. And our investors eventually did get their money back, but it took a few years, and that one was only $650,000. But the rest of us never got paid, and we never will. So it is a gamble. But I will say, creatively, and just for my own soul, Digging Up the Marrow saved me. And to go and do something and not have to take notes and answer to anybody or cater and try to make it as appealing to a wide audience as possible. And we just made something that we wanted to make. And there's no huge movie stars in it. There's no anything. It's just made out of love. And thankfully it worked. But we also had the confidence at this point to do that because of the fan base that we have. So we knew that even if only our fans showed up for it, we'd still be kind of okay. But thankfully, it's catching on much wider, and we have our expectations are pretty high now for what this is going to do, and I think that's great. So I would definitely do it again, but it is a gamble every single time.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about your process a little bit. You mentioned that you get up at 2 a.m. and write till 8 a.m. Maybe you can talk about, your process for writing this script. Is that kind of what the template you would get up every night at 2 a.m. and write for whatever that is, 6 hours? And if so, how many days, how many months does it take you to write a script like this?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, like, I'm not the best, like the most stellar, healthiest example that anybody should follow, because first of all, I only write when I'm inspired to write. I don't have that thing that other writers do where every day from this time to this time they're writing, even if it's not good, they're writing. I feel like that's a waste of time. If my palms aren't sweating and I don't have, like, for lack of a better term, like a raising erection in my pants over this thing that I'm doing, then I'm not going to do it. So by the time I do get to the point that I'm like, I'm going to write this, I have it so thought out, and I know every scene, and I've seen the movie in my head, and so I'm able to write fairly quickly, usually. But something like Holliston, which is 10 half-hour episodes and an hour Christmas special, and I'm the sole writer on the show, that's like 1,000 pages of content. And so that'll take me a good 2 or 3 months. But I did it while on set of Hatchet 3, which I was only producing, not directing. So it depends. It's not like I'm doing that every day, working those hours and just writing. But I'm not just a writer. I'm also a producer, a director, and an actor. And so there's always the promotion for these things, and there's editing, and there's always a reason to stay awake. And I think, I'm going to be 40 in 2 months. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this to myself. I really don't. The big wake-up call happened during season 2 of Holliston. During filming in front of an audience, I passed out in the middle of a scene. And I stayed on my feet, but I just went to sleep. And it was just purely from exhaustion. But the scene started, and it was a scene where Dee Snider and Joe Lynch had most of the lines, and the next thing I know, I heard the buzzer, and everyone's laughing, and I was out. So I can't keep doing that forever, and I don't expect anybody else to. But I just say that as an example of, don't have the excuse of, well, I have this day job, and I've got the wife and the kids, and it's just too hard to find time to write. You have to make that time if you're inspired to do so. If you don't have it, if you don't have the idea, it's not going to happen. Just by making yourself sit in front of a computer, it's not going to work. You have to already have seen what it is, and you can play it back in your head backwards and forwards. That's when you really take the time.
Yeah, sure. Well, 1,000 pages in 3 months, that's a significant page count every day. So you must have been just churning out pages, whether you're inspired or not.
Well, I love that show so much. And by the time we finished shooting season 1, we already had all the episodes for season 2. And Joe Lynch, who's not only my co-star, but also another executive producer, we spend weeks bouncing off the storylines and the character arcs and the ideas, so that by the time I go off to write, I almost have every joke planned out, and it does happen very fast. But it's also an enjoyable process. I've done a few studio assignments where I didn't enjoy the process, and I did it because I thought that's what I was supposed to do, or because there was a paycheck attached to it. This was very early on. Same thing with directing. I once took a job directing a pilot for an MTV show that thankfully never aired. I don't even think the pilot even got finished. It was terrible, and I didn't want to do it at all. But my agents were like, you need to be directing television, and ultimately, they were right, because that helped when Holliston happened, that I could be the director and the showrunner. So I'm glad I did it, but it was a painful process. And if you're writing and you don't love what you're writing and you don't love the process, that's hell. It's hell to sit and write that much stuff and not love it. So write what you love, and you'll be surprised how fast it will come out. But if you're sitting there struggling over every line of dialogue and you don't know where it's going, and that's usually a pretty good sign that it's not working. But if it's coming pretty fluid and you're happy and you feel really good each day, whether you got 5 pages done or 25 pages done, and I'm not saying too that I'll sit down and bang out a 40-page day and it's great. It's not. It still needs to be rewritten, but I feel good about where I'm going with it. So that definitely helps. And with Holliston specifically, there is no writer's room. There's just myself. And with season 2, I brought on another director, which helped a lot. He shadowed me on season 1, and on season 2, he took the reins in directing a lot of the episodes, and that helped because then on set I could just be a writer and an actor, and I didn't have to go and keep planning every camera angle. He had that. So especially because it's multi-camera sitcom, it's not that hard as far as photography goes. But the cast, especially the main ensemble, Joe, Corey, and Maura, that's really my writer's room. We spend 3 months or 2 months on season 2 rehearsing, and we rehearse for a few hours every night and just beat out the material. And if a joke isn't working, I know then that it's not working. And they're the only ones who I take joke pitches from and ideas from. Like if they don't think something's funny, then I lose it. And by the time we get to set, we can shoot 25, 30 pages a day because it's basically just like doing theater, and we know it inside and out. So that's how we pull off that show with that process, which is atypical to every other sitcom process. Usually there's a writer's room. They shoot 1 episode a week. We block shoot like a feature. So we shoot the whole season in 6 weeks or 5 weeks sometimes. And it's very difficult, but if you're prepared, it's a lot smoother and a lot easier than it might seem. And it's fun. You're so lucky when you work on one of these things when it's fun, because it's so hard and everything goes wrong. But if you're still smiling at the end of the day, then that's pretty awesome. And I can't. Hatchet 2 was hard, and Hatchet 3 was hard in a way where I didn't really enjoy the process, unfortunately, which is why I didn't direct Hatchet 3. But with the second one, everything just kept going wrong. We got hit with the swine flu, and the whole crew was throwing up. Like while we were filming, I was throwing up in a bucket while I'm trying to direct. You can't call in sick. The money's going, and the train's left the station. So it doesn't matter what happens. If there's a death in your family, you can't leave, because on these lower budget things, like if you stop for a day, all that money goes out the window. The crew's still getting paid. The locations are still getting paid. They're not going to say, "Oh, it's okay, you were sick, so don't worry about it." You booked their time. So that process was horrible. And then also, just like a side note about that movie, was that we thought that one was going to be straight to video. And because with Hatchet 1, the MPAA had such a hard time with that movie, which still to this day makes no sense. When there was stuff like Hostel and Saw and The Hills Have Eyes coming out, and then our movie that was a comedy and there's no realistic gore in it, they cut it to shit. So by the time it went out in theaters, it wasn't even my movie anymore, and it was heartbreaking. So with Hatchet 2, it was going to go straight to video. So we went balls out with that one, and incredible effects and gore and carnage, and it was so funny. And then all of a sudden the distributor was like, "We're going to go to theaters with this." And it was like, oh no. But they had found this relationship with AMC Theaters to do this thing called, it was a new program called AMC Independent, and they were going to put it in mainstream theaters and multiplexes without a rating, which hadn't happened for a horror movie in like 25, 30 years. Normally, you can play independent theaters, but not mainstream shopping malls and stuff. So it was a really big deal, and it was very exciting. And then the movie opened and mysteriously disappeared from all screens within 48 hours. And nobody will speak up as to what happened. No, I mean, it's very obvious that a certain group had to get rid of that film, because what if it had worked? What if every horror fan bought a ticket to that movie, even if they couldn't get to it, and it performed? Well, then nobody would go to the MPAA anymore, because you wouldn't need to. So it was devastating. So yeah, that whole process was very, very hard, and I'll never really know what happened. I love AMC for taking the risk, and I don't blame them one bit if they caved under pressure, whatever the reason was to pull that movie. But, that was the angle. That was the trailer. That was the poster, uncut and unrated. It's like, so that was all of it. But then right before it came out, I remember hearing from the publicist, stop talking about the fact that it's unrated, don't push that anymore. And it's like, it's all over the poster. It's all over the trailer. That's been the whole campaign. So something happened there. The only thing
and the conclusion is of that story is though no other movies after that went into theaters that were unrated. Is that what you're saying?
Not like that. No. I mean, movies can play theaters without a rating. Up the Marrow is unrated, even though I think if we did get it rated, it would be PG-13 easily. But we just don't want to give the ratings board that money. Like there's no reason to have a rating because we're playing independent theaters with this, so we don't have to.
And
have a rating.
Your box office numbers were good for the first, what you're saying, the first 48 hours. Your box office numbers were good, and then the theater pulled it after 2 days.
Well, we don't know what our real box office numbers were because it's impossible to do the math. It opened Thursday night at midnight on 68 screens, but Friday morning we were already seeing on Twitter people saying, hey, I just went to the theater, the movie's not playing. It's gone. So we don't know how many screens it was actually even on. In fact, by Friday night, it could have been on 3 screens. So to try to factor in a per-screen average, I think the number they came up with was like $1,500 per screen, which is good for a movie like that that's not marketed and that small of a release. But I can tell you that very same weekend, a movie that was advertised and did have marketing called Chain Letter opened on way more screens than Hatchet at AMC, and it stayed on for 2 weeks. So that is what they tried to say. They said, oh, the movie wasn't performing, so we pulled it. That's never happened in the history of cinema. Waterworld didn't get pulled. Ishtar didn't get pulled. So, it was heartbreaking to watch that happen. And if I went back in time, would I do it again? Would I try to stand up against the MPAA knowing the whole time that I'm going to lose? Yes, I would. And I'm glad I did it. And it's because they were being unfair on me. It was an independent movie. We don't pay their salaries. So they were already under pressure because of the studio torture porn and stuff, and they just picked the wrong movie to be so hard on. There's nothing in Hatchet that's realistic at all. So that was it was really hard. In fact, I don't even know how I made it through that. Because then, to the conspiracies online that we pulled it. It was a publicity stunt. I mean, some of the stupid shit that people say where it's like just think about the math in that. If we were to do that, or Dark Sky, the distributor, the amount of money that they lost by that movie getting pulled, and yet they still stood by me. They never said, this is your fault for doing all those interviews and telling the truth about what the MPAA did to you, and that's why this got pulled. Nothing. They totally had my back through the whole thing, which was why we continue to work with them. But it's just funny that years from now, people are going to look back and hear that story and then watch that movie and be like, over this? And that's what happened, right? Then the movie became notorious. It was pulled from theaters. And so then you see it when it comes out on DVD and you're like, what? So, because it doesn't make any sense. It is by far not the most horrific movie you'll ever see. But it happened.
So maybe just to wrap up, you can tell us, you told us a little bit about you're going to do this tour with Digging Up the Marrow. Maybe you can tell us some of the dates for that. If people are listening to this podcast, maybe they can attend one of those, or then even the release dates after that tour finishes. Yeah,
well, the movie comes out on February 20th on VOD, and it'll be on every single platform. So wherever, whether it's iTunes or your cable's video on demand, it'll be there. And it also opens in Los Angeles at the NoHo 7 Theater on February 20th. About 2 weeks later, it's going to expand to about 9 or 10 other cities, but I don't know exactly which cities yet. I'm not going to know that for a few more days. But prior to that, we're doing a tour with it, which starts in San Francisco, in Berkeley, on Thursday, February 12th. And then we go to Boston on the 16th, New York on the 17th, and Austin, Texas on the 18th, and then Los Angeles on the 19th. Because when the movie opens here on the 20th, it's just the movie, it's not the tour. But the tour is the movie and myself and Alex Pardee, the artist whose work the movie's inspired by, will be there. We'll do a Q&A, and then afterwards in the lobby, we'll have the whole art exhibit set up so people can see the artwork that inspired it. And there's even behind the scenes pictures and stuff that show how the monsters came together. and one of the monsters from the film will be there where people can take pictures with it, which is really cool because when you see these things up close and personal, it's amazing just how cool they look and how real they actually are from whatever angle you look at them at. And then there'll be merchandise that's exclusive to the tour, like certain art prints and T-shirts and things like that you can only get if you see one of the tour stops. And all of that is for $15. So, like, if you go see a 3D movie at the ArcLight in LA on a Saturday, it's $20. And so we're keeping the prices completely standard and fair, even though we're offering people this big experience. So it's not about necessarily making money. It's about raising awareness for the film because we're confident the word of mouth is going to be extremely positive from anybody who sees it. And by giving back to the fans, which has always been the priority here, and it's why this company exists and why we've had the success we have had. Like when I do a convention, I don't charge for my autograph. I never have. I don't charge for pictures with me. It's always free. I'm the only one at those conventions who does that, and I've always done it that way. But the way I see it, if you're going to stand in line for a few hours just to meet me because you bought my movie and you want me to sign it, I'm like, what? How can I then say, oh, now it's $30 for me to write my autograph on that? Like, I get why people do it, and they got to make a living. But we only get to do this and exist because of these fans. And they're so fiercely loyal and wonderful and supportive. So that's why with this tour, we easily could have charged like $40 a general admission ticket. Like there's a $50 ticket VIP option, but all that is it secures the $50 art print. So if you get that ticket, you're basically just buying the art print and your ticket is free. So it's not about gouging the fans for money. It's about giving them something special and letting them know that you care. And there's nothing else like this out there. Darren Bousman did a tour with Repo, the Genetic Rock Opera, and Devil's Carnival, which are very different from this in terms of what the movies are. But he had like circus performers and, he made a show out of it. And people really loved that. So I think in this day and age when the average person just waits for Netflix, which is, look, I'm happy whenever somebody's going to give me 90 minutes of their time to watch something I made. I am. But it is heartbreaking when you put 4 years into a movie and your own money's on the line and you're like, here's the trailer. And they say, that looks awesome. When is it on Netflix? Well, it's on VOD right now, and it's on DVD, and with all this extra stuff that we made ourselves for free, and it's in theaters. Yeah, I don't do that. I only watch things on Netflix. Well, we don't get anything for that, so it's hard. But at least our fan base, for the most part, the real fans, they would never pirate one of our movies or torrent it. That's not to say millions of others don't do that to us, and it sucks. And that would be a whole nother conversation, but in what other field, in what other career would somebody steal from you and feel that they are entitled to come up and tell you that to your face? And if you say something back or get mad about it, you are the asshole, not them, because they were entitled for that, to that product because they wanted to see it. That's all. That's why they deserved it for free. It wasn't out here in this country yet. It was going to take another 2 months. And I wanted it now, so I stole it because the technology exists that I can steal it. And fuck you. But every time that I've tried to tell people how personally that affects us and how sometimes we've come so close to having to close down and never make another movie again because it's a business. If we lose our investors' money or the distributor doesn't make the money back or make a profit, they don't care that 5 million people stole it and loved it. It's the ones who paid to see it legally. That's all that matters to them. So it's, but it's heartbreaking. I have a podcast called The Movie Crypt I think it's like the #1 TV and filmmaking podcast. Entertainment Weekly just put in their like top 20 podcasts, the January issue. And, we one time had a filmmaker on who was pro-piracy, which was a whole ridiculous discussion. And it's almost like if you were in the middle of a riot and everyone's looting stores, standing up in front of your store and saying, go ahead, take my shit, man, I'm with you, because you just don't want to get hurt. Like, what it was, because man, pirates fucking hate when filmmakers say don't steal my stuff. But it
I'll just throw this idea out there. I've taken up enough of your time, so we're definitely going along, but I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts. I actually wrote a script called downloadthismovieforfree.com, and, one of the things that the internet is great for is all this piracy and people sharing content, and so I basically wrote this script, downloadthismovieforfree.com. That's literally the title of it, and I literally have that domain name. But then what I did was I just wrote in, I have a bunch of other, online businesses, and I basically just wrote those into the script. So the idea is that you want people to pirate this and steal it and pass it along, because it's really just wrapped in as a product placement for my other products that I'm selling.
I think that's great. If that's what you're doing, that's awesome. But now, if I gave you $3 million to produce that, and then you put it online, whether you did it or somebody else did, and everybody stole it, and you were saying to me, dude, I'm really sorry, but you lost your $3 million, but everybody really liked it, and look how popular it is. Now, here's my new one. You want to invest in it? I would not only tell you to go fuck yourself, but I would blackball you to everybody else I know. So
no, absolutely.
That's the problem. There are certain things, and we put out so much free content, so much short films, the podcast, 2 hours every week with huge celebrities, whether it's Slash or James Gunn or Bob Goldthwait or Jordan Peele, telling their candid life stories about their careers that you cannot hear anywhere else. It's for free on Geek Nation and iTunes every week. Joe Lynch and I do this podcast, and we have 500,000 listeners a week. And then those same people will turn around and steal our movies. It's like, what more can I give you to just get you to see what I do legally? We could easily charge for that podcast at this point. Easily. They use it in film schools, Emerson, UCLA. We've heard from students that the teachers reference the podcast. But it's free. So it is very hard, but I think the line has been blurred. And, the music industry, the way that they've handled it is accepting very few artists are actually ever going to make money off of their music again, and they know that, but they can tour. And they can sell T-shirts at these tours, and that's how they make money. So good if everybody's file sharing, because it's hopefully going to get them to come see the show. But with movies and TV, it's not that simple. It's not going to go away. It's not.
Don't you think there's an element of what I'm getting at with the downloadthismovieforfree.com is that, you could start to package some of these elements into your film, just knowing that there is going to be a certain amount of piracy and making it, I would say that's kind of almost like the front end, getting money from corporate sponsors or, product placement, really taking that to another level.
That's really, let me ask you this. When you watch Digging Up the Marrow, let's say you loved it, right? You steal it online, you loved it, it's awesome. And you see in the movie that we also made Hatchet and Frozen and 2 seasons of this TV show called Holliston. Would you just steal those too? Or would you say, I'm going to buy those because I like this one that I sold for free?
Yeah. No, I totally get your point about piracy, and I don't steal movies, and I've never stolen movies. I suppose when I was a kid, I probably stole some software, and I totally get it, and I think it is reprehensible. But using your example of digging up the marrow, I mean, maybe there were some masks that you could sell. Maybe there's a whole, you could sell those monster masks. Maybe there's a whole sort of peripheral business behind that movie that maybe people aren't necessarily doing or thinking about. Now, I'm just throwing out ideas again. Where this is at this point just spitballing an idea here. I'm not sure how well thought out it is.
We do have an online store with T-shirts and posters and all that other stuff. But I'm a filmmaker and I'm an artist, and I spend years and years and millions of dollars of other people's money that are trusting me to make these things and tell these stories. I'm not in the T-shirt business. So that money that we make from the T-shirts and the masks and other things that get made, it all goes right back into the studio to pay the rent and keep this place going. And if we make enough where we can actually pay rent and there's a little bit left over, then that goes into the next movie. It's never gone into our pockets. So it's hard at this level to ever justify it. And some people will say, well, look, I never would have paid to see that anyway. Well, that's fine. But up until this technology existed, like, and the people who say it's good word of mouth, by people pirating it, it's good word of mouth. So how did the world exist until this time? Wasn't there still word of mouth by word of mouth? And isn't there Twitter and Facebook and all these other things? So, I mean, we give so much for free in the hopes that people will say, you know what, look at all of this they gave me. Fuck it, I'll see this legally. I'll spend the $6 on VOD or the $1 on whatever it might be. It really would make the difference. And that's the thing, like, on the positive, our fan base they're so willing to support us because they love what we do, and they've been with us for years and years now, and they understand that through their support, the next one's going to get made. And we're very lucky and very fortunate because not a lot of other people have that. But my heart breaks for first-time filmmakers. And when everybody was so busy villainizing Lars Ulrich, when Metallica stood up to Napster, which in hindsight, anybody who tries to say that they weren't right has their head up their ass, because look what happened to the music industry. And they stood alone trying to say this isn't right. You can't just take our music without asking us. But everybody turned him into a villain. And now, let's look at it compared to the movie industry, which how Hollywood didn't see that we were next in line, I don't know. But if you're a first-time filmmaker, like if you wrote a script and you sent it to me here at Aeroscope, and I said, I believe in this, and I like your short films, I believe you can direct this, we're going to give you $1.5 million, and your dream's going to come true, and you're going to get to make your movie, and everybody stole it, you're not going to work again. You're not with us. And not with anybody we know. It's just the business of it. Even if your movie was great, if we didn't get the money back and we all lost our money and went out of business, it's done. But a lot of people don't care. If the technology exists and they can just push this button instead of that button and steal it, they'll steal it. And until Hollywood starts prosecuting more people publicly for it, it's going to keep going. Because you don't walk into Best Buy and steal something, because there's a really good chance you're going to get caught at the door by security. But with movies, it's like 1 in a million chances that you're going to be the one that they come after. Because they can go after everybody. They can trace the IP, they can find you. But it's such an epidemic that they don't. So I feel bad and I've seen it happen, a lot of first-time filmmakers who made great movies that were critically well-received, that did well at festivals, that everybody else I ever meet talks about and likes, but they didn't do any business, and they lost money, and now they can't work again. So it's sad. Thankfully, when I hit, it was with Hatchet in 2007, and this epidemic was not as bad as it was. And it's just such a hard thing to talk about, because the people who do it get so mad if you say ouch. And that's the most confusing part of all of it, is the human part of it. Why is it okay to kick somebody, but if they say, ow, that hurt, now they're an asshole, and they're entitled, and they're arrogant. I mean, when Frozen was getting torrented like crazy, and the deal with Frozen was that if we hit, I don't know the number, but if we hit a certain per screen average, supposedly the movie would have expanded and they would have put marketing money behind it. And something crazy like, it was close to 1 million people stole it in the first 2 days that it opened in theaters. And it was because we had done too many festivals, and one of those screeners got out, and that was it. So I spoke out on Twitter and said, hey, look, if you stole it and you liked it, please go on Fandango and just buy a $6 matinee ticket to some theater that's showing it. Because if we can hit a certain per screen average, it will change the life of not just this movie, but everybody who worked on it. And no, we don't get that money, but we will get much bigger opportunities. So if you liked it, please consider buying it. And I always go back to these 3 quotes. But the first 3 responses I got were, the first one was, fuck you, you greedy Jew, don't you have enough money? The second one was, we only steal your movies because we like them, so you should be faking us. And then the third one was, I pay, whatever it was, $45 a month for high-speed internet, you owe me this. And New York Magazine watched that happen to me and called me up and asked to do a story on it. And that just made it even worse because they were like, we want to put a real person behind what everybody thinks is a victimless crime. Everyone thinks they're sticking it to the man, or that if you have a career making movies, you're rich. I mean, even now, 9 movies, 2 seasons of a TV show later, all these awards, all this success, like, there's moments in time when we're all shit broke. And thankfully, I don't have children or whatever, but Will's got a wife and 2 kids. Corey's got I mean, it's like, we don't know how we're going to even get by sometimes. That's the reality of this. Maybe one day we'll make something that blows up so big and gets that marketing that's going to buy that opening release or whatever, but it hasn't happened yet. And still, though, I'm very lucky I get to do this for a career. I'm very grateful for the success I've had, and I'm beyond grateful for the fans I have because they are real fans, and man, are they awesome. But when somebody wants,
I mean, maybe it's because I'm in the industry, but I mean, those responses you got on Twitter are absolutely ridiculous arguments. And as I said, maybe it's because I'm in the industry. I don't think that there's any legitimate, like, moral or ethical argument. Like, if you just want to say, well, I'm a thief and I don't care, that's fine. But you can't make any kind of a legitimate moral argument that somehow stealing someone's stuff is correct.
Wait, I don't know how big the audience is for your podcast, but there's somebody right now listening who hates me for saying all this, and maybe they will, right? And if you're hearing me right now and you disagree with me and you think it's okay and you want to make your case for why it's okay, your case that I guarantee you is going to be full of holes, do it. Like, write in and explain yourself and why it's okay what you do. But like with our podcast, because the reach is so massive, I couldn't believe the response that we got. And what was odd was that the filmmaker who was pro internet piracy, we got such a horrible response to that, where their followers, who are all pirates, who of course, look, if a filmmaker is going to endorse what you do, you're going to point to them and follow them and say, hey, they know what's up. Like, they're a good guy. Then they all suddenly started listening to our podcast. And anybody who said they were against piracy, they would just go after them on Twitter. Fuck you, and you suck, and you don't know anything. But one of her cases was that it's good for word of mouth, and you should only be so lucky to have a movie be embraced by the Pirate Bay community. Well, if that's true, then why, when we speak out against piracy, do they punish us by sending Joe and I links to our films that they just uploaded? Like, literally, they'll upload like Hatchet 3 or Season of Holliston, and then send us the link on Twitter and with a smiley face or a fuck you. And it's like, there's something bigger wrong here. And that's why we say it's a hard issue, because it's a humanity issue. Now, there are people who they just don't know the difference. There's kids who, like, that's just their friend told them, oh, you want to see Transformers? Here, I'll send you the link. And they don't know any different. They don't realize. They want to see Transformers, and there's the link, and cool. I get that. But hopefully, and that's why I do bother to talk about it, is I do hear from people consistently that they're like, I never realized who I was actually stealing from or what I was doing, and I won't do it anymore. So, one person hears this and says, you know what, fuck, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'll pay the $3, $6, whatever it might be. Then it was worth it. But it's such a hard issue to do. And I would have loved to have done more festivals with Marrow, but we knew we could trust Fright Fest, and I went there with it in hand, and I left with it in hand. And I mean, here we are, 18 days out from release, and everything online claiming that you can download it here is fake. Nobody has it, because it's right here, right now, in my hand, right here, and I'm the only one who has it. So that's what it's come down to now. Now, when it hits VOD on the 20th, 2 hours later, it'll be everywhere. There's nothing we can do about that. But at least we got it this far, and for that, I'm grateful.
Sure, sure. Well, it's been a great interview. I mean, as I said, you've given me a lot of time. There are a lot of great points in here. I really appreciate it, Adam. Maybe just to wrap things up, you can just tell us your Twitter handle, Facebook page. If you have a blog, you can mention that. Anything, if people just want to follow your career, see what you're up to, just, give us that information now.
Sure. Well, I'm on Twitter. It's at Adam_F, like fucking, at Adam_FN_Green, just because there's a million Adam Greens on there. That was the best I could do when I got my handle a number of years ago. And then my website, though, is ariescope.com. That's the website for the company, what we do here, ARIESCOPE.com. And there's something like 60 or 70 free short films, web series, blogs, news, videos, all the trailers to our movies, and of course there's also the Buy Stuff store where you can buy any of the movies on DVD or Blu-ray, autographed, and the same price as they are on Amazon. Posters, all that stuff is there, but that's the best way to stay up on what's going on, especially with the release of Up the Marrow, because as I said, there's going to be more cities announced and more appearances announced, and all of that stuff will be listed there. And I'm on Facebook too. If you just type in Adam Green, it's a fan page, but I'm the one who actually operates that in response to everybody. The fan base had grown too big, and if you keep a private page, they cap you at 5,000 friends. So that's why it's a fan page. And the other good thing for everybody listening who does work in the industry, the good thing about the fan page is that, look, it's the same thing as the other page, but you can make it so that people can't private message you, so that way anything that they're going to say to you is public and they're accountable for it, and that really massively curbs any weirdos or people that are going to send you their pitches or scripts and stuff. And actually, that's a good thing to close on, too. I know, as somebody who's, I'm still struggling, no matter what it might look like, and getting my start, how hard it is just to get somebody to read your script that is good, that it's not bad like all the other ones that are out there. It's great. I know how heartbreaking that is, that people won't, the people you want to have read it won't read it, but it's because of legal issues. Like, if somebody sends me a script and I read it or even accept it, and they can prove that it got to me, and it's a script about werewolves, right? And then I make a movie about werewolves in the next couple of years, or even 20 years from now, they could come after me and try to sue me and say, you stole my idea because I sent you that script. Now, they're not going to win, but I'm not going to want my name dragged through the mud either. And so there's a lot of people that have made their livings off of suing producers for bullshit stuff, these frivolous lawsuits, and they get settlements out of court to make it go away. So that's why there is no way to get me a script. If you want me to read something, you got to go through my agent and through my lawyer and stuff, and it's everything's documented that way. You can't send me something on Twitter or ask for my email. I know you who are listening right now are not the person who's going to do that, but unfortunately there's somebody else who is. So I can't have that. So that's why. But also too, think about this: when you want to send your script, send it to somebody like a producer. Send it to somebody or a director who doesn't direct their own material. Because I basically just direct what I write for the most part. I'm not looking for other scripts. I have enough of my own that I'm trying to get made. So I'm not the right one to be sending it to. But I'm sure there's other directors out there and other production companies that they're constantly looking for new material. So those are the people you want to try to get your stuff in front of. But it's hard, and I know how hard it is. But you got to just find a way to get people's attention. And YouTube is a great way now to do that. Make something awesome, and hopefully it catches on. But, like I said very early on, the fact that I work in a genre that has conventions and I can go there and present my stuff really, really helped launch this whole thing. But I'm lucky that horror is my love. But if you're working in a different genre, I don't know. But if you do work in horror, go to those conventions, meet people, talk to them. You can go to a horror convention knowing nobody, and with minimal effort, you will leave there with at least 5 good friends. Trust me, there's no nicer people on the planet than horror fans. better than Star Wars geeks, better than sci-fi geeks, better than the people at Comic-Con, all of it. And I love all those people too because I'm one of them. But horror people especially, if you're one of them, like, they know, and they are so happy to meet you and be your friend and talk to you. It doesn't matter how scary they look or all the tattoos and the black eyeliner and all that stuff. That's just them. But go to a convention. They're everywhere. They're in almost every city. There's a convention at least once a year, and try it out. And I think you'll be very happy with the results because we are a community unlike any other genre, and those conventions are a huge part of it.
For sure, for sure. Well, Adam, as I said, this has been a great interview. We definitely ran a little long, but very interesting. Lots of great tips. I mean, you just kind of laid out your story, and I think there's a lot of great tips for people to take from that. So I really appreciate your coming on. I wish you the best, too, with Digging Up the Marrow. I hope it goes well for you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on.
I'm going to be teaching another SYS Select class called Writing a Great Second Act for Your Screenplay. The second act is usually the most difficult part of writing the screenplay. It can be a real slog. Obviously, the first act and the third act are incredibly important, but if your second act doesn't work, your script is going to be dead in the water. So if you're having trouble with the second act, check out this class. I'm going to be giving numerous tips and tricks about how to get through the second act and make it all work. I'm going to be reviewing the second acts of Legally Blonde and Back to the Future, scripts that both have excellent second acts to demonstrate all the lessons that I'll be teaching. And I'm someone who really learns a lot by seeing actual examples, so that's what I'll be doing in the class. The class is going to take place on Saturday, March 7th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. If you'd like to learn more about the class, go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/classes. Also, if you're listening to this after the class has taken place, no problem. I will record the class too and put it in the SYS Select forum. In fact, all the classes that have been taught are recorded, are in the forum for SYS Select members. There's more than a dozen classes in there now. To learn more about SYS Select, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, though, to sign up for the class, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/classes. The biggest takeaway for me today talking with Adam, and I hope for everyone listening to this, is just how much Adam hustles to get things done. I mean, he's literally hustling so much that he's passing out from exhaustion. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at his IMDb page. I think most people would agree he's pretty successful. He's got a bunch of movies under his belt and even a TV show that he's written and produced and starred in. But you heard him. Things can get pretty lean, even for someone at his level. So he still has to hustle like mad to continue to make a living as a filmmaker. I think there are a lot of newer writers who have this idyllic vision of what being a screenwriter is like. You know, they think that they're going to get up in the morning, have a nice cup of coffee, read the paper, take the dog out for a leisurely walk, and then get to their computer by about 10 and write for a few hours and call it a day. I suppose there are a few people out there who are lucky enough to have this sort of life, but it's nobody that I know. Hopefully from listening to Adam's interview, you can see, at least for some successful filmmakers, the hustle never stops. The hard work never really gets any easier. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.